In an era before man walked the earth, the land was ruled by eternal deities who we now know as the Ancient Ones. Colossal titans with an unparalleled potential for destruction who governed over a legion of nightmares that terrorized the inhabitants of the old world.
They're like something from a nightmare.
No, there's something nightmares are from. Everything in our stable is remnant of the old world, courtesy of you know who.
They consist of everything from werewolves and wraiths to fang-faced ballerinas and the mysterious yet petrifying Kevin. It's implied that the Ancient Ones have existed since the beginning of the Earth. The only clue we're given is that they're older than anything known, so I'll just clock this one at 4.5 billion BCE. But at some point, the monsters of the old world died out, humans inhabited the Earth, and the Ancient Ones retreated into the planet's deepest crevices. Still, they would see everything that happened on the surface.
The Ancient Ones see everything.
It became tradition for humans to offer a sacrifice to the Ancient Ones each year during the summer in the Northern Hemisphere. As long as the Ancient Ones accepted the sacrifice, the primeval gods would stay below, and the Earth would live to see another year. What these sacrifices entail is different in different parts of the world, but we see etchings of some of them at the beginning of the Cabin in the Woods, an ancient Egyptian execution, a Mayan cardiotomy, the offering of an infant to a colossus, and a hooded figure's ritualistic slashing of an agonized victim in some kind of ceremonial space, among others. If we look at the floor in this one, it features a shape which fans have affectionately dubbed as a swastagram. It appears to be a depiction of the chamber, a huge subterranean location featuring a circular platform elevated above a vast chasm, below which the Ancient Ones reside. The swastagram is symbolic of the subjects whose blood is needed for the American version of the sacrifice, with each of the spurs representing an archetypal victim. There are 5 roles that must be filled: the whore, the athlete, the scholar, the fool, and finally, the virgin. Other cultures have their own versions of the sacrifice, as seen in the opening etchings, but each of them has one thing in common: punishment of youth.
It's different in every culture. It has changed over the years, but it has always required youth.
To learn about who the Ancient Ones really are, the secret second ritual hidden below the surface, and the reason for planetary destruction, stick around to the end of this video. This video is sponsored by PDS Debt. Welcome to Horror History. It's almost summer. I'm sure many of you are currently planning your own trips to a lakeside cabin, or the beach, or maybe just the pool, or maybe just staying in and watching Jaws on a laptop while sitting in a floaty in your bathtub. Whatever the case may be, you're not gonna wanna do any of that without the proper gear. I'm talking about my new Literally Dead merch line. Tote bag, beach towel, shirts, tank top. Say goodbye to Stanley. This summer, we're doing the Literally Dead tumbler. I hope you are ready for emo boy summer, because I'm gonna be bringing it every day. But the thing about Literally Dead is these products will become literally dead. Once these are sold out, they're gone and you can't get them anymore. I'm putting them out on this video first, so if you're seeing this, you may have a chance to get it still, but you have to act fast. So go take your girlfriend's debit card out of her purse right now before she regains consciousness. The Cabin in the Woods is a movie that I initially kind of wrote off for being stupid 27 minutes in when I saw this happen.
There. What the hell was that?
The wind must have blown it over.
No, you're inside, and that's a heavy door on the ground. That makes no sense. But if we look into some of the movie's hidden details, there may actually be a reasonable explanation for this line. I recently had a sudden urge to revisit this movie, and I enjoyed it a lot more. The Cabin in the Woods is a 2011 horror film about 5 friends who visit this remote cabin, if you didn't figure that out from the title, but their experience is manipulated by this underground organization of office workers who have rigged the area in order to control their actions, forcing them into acting out typical overused horror movie tropes. The movie was directed by Drew Goddard, who at the time of writing has only directed one more movie, Bad Times at the El Royale, which kind of has a similar concept. Instead of 5 people at a cabin, it's 7 people at a hotel. Both feature video surveillance from a secret organization, and both feature a web of secrets being unraveled. Goddard seems to be more interested in writing and producing than directing, which is kind of ironic because one of the most important characters in The Cabin in the Woods is called the director, and there are a lot of parallels between her and a film director. But in order to get into that, I first gotta break down the group known as the Organization and their link to the Ancient Ones. As the existence of the gods of the old world faded from public memory in the years following the prehistoric era, there was one group, a secret society, who saw to it that the proper sacrifices were made every year.
It's our task to placate the Ancient Ones, as it's yours to be offered up to them.
At some point, the operation evolved into something resembling a business. A cabin was established. in the woods. And a world-class facility was built underneath it, linking the Chamber of the Ancients down below to the seemingly innocuous lakeside getaway. The operation included several departments relevant to the ritual itself, like engineering, chemistry, research, development, biomed, demolition, and most importantly, zoology.
I'm not even sure we have one of these.
Zoology swears we do.
They'd know. Okay.
The zoology department was incredibly skilled in their craft, maybe even too skilled for their own good. The characters in The Cabin in the Woods are not the only ones who have been brainwashed by a secret organization pulling the strings. Credit card companies, student loan issuers, and other evil groups spend billions every year in marketing to convince people to get in debt and stay in debt. But unlike the Cabin characters, if that's the situation you find yourself in, there is hope. If you're struggling with credit cards, personal loans, collections, or medical bills, you need to check out PDS Debt. PDS provides a service to match you with debt solutions tailored to your financial situation. They strive to understand your specific scenario and can help provide alternative solutions to becoming debt-free. If you're making payments every month on your debt and your balances aren't going down, PDS has solutions for you. Everyone with $10,000 or more in eligible debt qualifies, and there's no minimum credit score required. Bad and fair credit accepted. They're here to help you save more while paying off your debt in a fraction of the time. And since you're a CZsWorld viewer, or at least you're viewing me right now, PDS Debt is offering you a free debt analysis. It only takes 30 seconds. So join the many CZsWorld viewers who have already slashed their debt by heading over to pdsdebt.com/CZsWorld to get your free debt assessment today. Zoology was responsible for recreating the nightmarish creatures that would terrorize the young victims of the ritual every year. Each of them is supposedly based on an ancient creature who roamed the earth eons ago before the dawn of man, the very origin of why we have nightmares today. The modern-day organization places bets on which monstrosity will be summoned each year, during which we can see many of the options, like werewolf, alien beast, mutants, wraiths, reptilias, demons, hell-lord, angry molesting tree, which is a reference to the Evil Dead, maybe the most well-known Cabin in the Woods style movie, giant snake, the scarecrow folk, snowman, dragon bat, dismemberment goblins, merman, unicorn, Sasquatch, Wendigo, Yeti, jack-o'-lantern, and the blob. Interestingly, there are also a handful of options that are some variation on humans, like zombies, clowns, witches, sexy witches, deadites, another reference to the Evil Dead, mummy, the bride, vampires, the reanimated, the Huron, the dolls, the doctors, zombie redneck torture family, giants, and twins, which are likely a reference to The Shining. Kevin isn't seen in the movie, but according to the official visual companion book, Kevin is a sweet-looking guy who seemed like he might work at a Best Buy until he dismembers people. There's also the ballerina girl with a face full of fangs. So not only are there 4 different types of zombies, but none of them could have existed before the dawn of man, leading me to believe that the organization may have created new species based on modern fears. This is semi-confirmed when we see more of the creatures that the zoology department has in captivity. Fornicus is a pinhead-like demon, and there's also a kraken, something based on a Scandinavian folktale. The killer robot is obviously a man-made invention. Most of the others are giant or more vicious versions of creatures found in our world, like the giant spider, wolves, birds of prey, giant frog, giant centipede, and giant monkey. I also noticed what appears to be the KKK and some prison inmates. But with only 5 people that need to be killed, what is the purpose of having at least 48 different types of monsters? That has to do with the rules of the ritual. I already discussed the 5 archetypes needed for the sacrifice. They must be warned of the danger by a harbinger, but ignore it. Then trigger one of the monsters by messing with some kind of artifact that they never should have touched in the first place. From there, the whore must be the first to die, and the virgin must be the last alive. With each sacrifice, the blood of the victim is drained into these stone carvings representing that person's role. The cabin is filled with objects that they shouldn't touch, and each one can lead to the summoning of one of the nightmare creatures. The sacrifices have to choose on their own, so the organization has created as many monster types as possible to maximize the potential for interaction. Plus, since this is all a show for the Ancient Ones, having a large variety ensures that the Ancient Ones will be entertained and satisfied.
We're not the only ones watching, Ken.
Gotta keep the customer satisfied.
The meaning here is obvious. The steps of the ritual also happen to be the typical recipe for your average formulaic Hollywood horror movie. The Evil Dead, Cabin Fever, Friday the 13th, Wrong Turn, The Breed, Zombievers. There's seemingly no end to the list of movies with an attractive cast getting massacred in and around a remote cabin. What makes this interesting is how the organization takes on the role of the filmmakers. In the present, there are 2 main players at the company who are responsible for how the sacrifice's story unfolds: Gary Sitterson and Steve Hadley. They sit at the control booth, influencing the variables to make sure that the rules are followed. The Cabin in the Woods also has 2 screenwriters, Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard. The connection is confirmed in the companion book, where Whedon says that these two represent the writers of the movie. I'm guessing Sitterson represents Whedon and Hadley represents Goddard, just going on appearances. Whedon was asked about it in the visual companion book, to which he agreed with my sentiment, saying, "I don't know, I always imagined that he was Hadley, sort of a hotshot, and Sitterson's older." Above them is the head of the organization, whose title is the director, aka the director of the movie. The analogy isn't perfect, because in a real movie production, the director would be on set making decisions, and the writers may or may not be, but the main idea here is that the organization are like the filmmakers, and the sacrifices are like the actors. Besides, if you were to change the director's title to the producer, it wouldn't really make sense. I don't think producer is a real title in most companies outside the world of entertainment. Some of the other departments also represent jobs you might find on a movie set, like electric, security, distribution, wranglers, accounting, and the kitchen staff, aka craft services. Sitterson and Hadley work for the American branch, but there are also international branches in cities around the world. While the American branch aims to please the Ancient Ones by recreating the typical American slasher, other countries aim to produce their own brand of regional horror. Japan produces a Yurei film, or a supernatural movie like Ringu or Ju-on, which is set in a classroom. We don't get an extensive look into the others, but Buenos Aires features a giant horned monkey, suggesting it may be a creature feature, while Madrid features raining fireballs, which could be indicative that they use the disaster movie formula. I don't know how they messed that up, to be honest. How hard is it to kill 5 people if you have fireballs? Maybe the rules for success are different in that one. Each year, only one country needs to pass in order to please the ancients and prevent them from causing the end of the world, which is kind of a disaster movie in itself. We don't know how long the cabin in the woods format of the ritual has been in place. At some point, they did use a different ritual, which involved a volcano.
Zombies. Remember when you could just throw a girl in a volcano?
My guess is that the cabin format was established in the 1970s or early 80s, alongside the rise of the slasher, when these remote cabin-style horror films came onto the scene. The Evil Dead, for example, was released in 1981. This means that the lore that the college kids stumble across in the cellar of the cabin, telling about events from 1903, is just something that was made up by the organization to make the experience more immersive. It seems the US has a mostly reliable record for success, other than one time they mentioned where there was a glitch in 1998, which is blamed on the chem department. I'll talk more about their role later. That brings up another question. What year is the movie set in? The only relevant clue is this poster in Dana's room for a music tour in 2007, so it must be sometime after that. The Cabin in the Woods came out in 2011, and it seems to be present day, so we could just call it 2011. Anyone have a problem with that? Good. In 2011, all of the other countries failed to meet the demands of their rituals, leaving only the US and Japan as the last hope to save the Earth. The organization selects a friend group and lures them into the cabin by selling it to the cousin of Kurt Vaughn, the athlete, who plans a trip with his girlfriend, Jules, the whore, her best friend Dana, the virgin, a football teammate named Holden, the scholar, and their stoner friend Marty, the fool. But none of these characters really fit their designated roles all that well. Kurt is supposed to be this dumb jock, but he's actually a sociology major on full academic scholarship with insightful book recommendations. Jules is supposed to be the dumb blonde slut, but she's actually a pre-med student, and the organization determines that her libido levels are too low, so they have to pipe drugs into the place in order to get her to fill the role. Dana is supposed to be the virgin. She's single, but she's sleeping with her professor.
The virgin.
Me? Virgin?
We work with what we have.
Holden is the scholar. In these types of movies, this role is usually a bookworm who isn't good with women, but that turns out to be anything but the case. Finally, there's Marty, the fool and stoner who is actually a mechanical genius with witty jokes who can see further than everyone else. In other words, the actors are much more interesting people than the characters they're supposed to portray. The organization is forcing them to fill these stereotype roles for no reason other than to repeat tradition. So they're put through the basic horror movie conventions, traveling outside the range of cell phone and GPS service, receiving the Harbinger's warning at a rundown gas station, and letting loose after settling in at the cabin. But during their stay, they continue to defy the norm. When Holden discovers a one-way mirror, or whatever we're calling these things now, in his room, he warns the others about it rather than peeping on Dana as she gets changed. That's why the organization has to intervene, and they do so in ways that explain the characters getting dumber, which is a common complaint about characters in horror movies. Anyone remember this commercial?
Why can't we just get in the running car?
Let's hide behind the chainsaws.
Smart. Yeah, okay.
If you're in a horror movie, you make poor decisions. That's what you do.
So, the chemicals in Jules' blonde hair dye are designed to slow her cognition, and riohyptase is piped in to increase the character's libido. But if we look at the stats that the organization is keeping, there's actually much more going on. Each character's vitals are being tracked, and there's also data on their hormones. We can see that each of them is listed as being on ryohyptase, which is listed as a PCB. PCBs are basically chemicals with no taste or smell, so this means that when they pipe in a chemical, it's not just going to one character's room, it's affecting everyone. If someone's under the influence of something, then they all are. There are other chemicals listed. Pheromones are naturally occurring chemicals that can trigger a response from other members of the same species. For example, a silk moth that secretes chemicals that can attract a mate. There aren't any known pheromones that are associated with humans, but then again, this is a company that has figured out how to revive ancient species and create actual ghosts. So maybe they have some pheromone discoveries that modern science hasn't figured out yet. The last substance that they're all afflicted with is thorazine, a mood regulator that can be used to relax or sedate a patient, as we saw in the original Halloween.
What do I give him when we take him in front of the judge?
Thorazine.
Barely be able to sit up.
That's the idea.
So what I didn't realize that first time I saw the movie was that it's not just a case of the characters randomly becoming dumber. When that trap door flies open and Kurt blames it on the wind, it probably has something to do with him being loopy due to all the drugs that all of them are on. In fact, this was confirmed by the director when he was asked about the movies that inspired Cabin. In watching the movies that partially inspired Cabin, did either of you think, is somebody pumping stupidity gas at the characters? Yes, I mean, haven't we all? I think everybody watches a horror movie and goes, I would never do that. I would never behave the way these people behave. It's just sort of a convention. It's an audience convention as well. To look at them and go, why are these kids acting so stupid? Except for one of them, Marty. While not fully explained, it's suggested that whatever he took before arriving at the cabin is somehow counteracting the chemical cocktail that the organization has come up with for him. He's the only one to sense danger in the objects found around the cellar.
I dare you all to go upstairs.
But he's not able to save the others. Dana's discovery of an old diary leads to the summoning of the zombie redneck torture family, and Kurt and Jules head out to the woods for privacy. Here, again, we see the filmmaker metaphor at its finest. As Jules and Kurt are about to get it on, all of the employees are watching the movie play out on screen, until they're ordered to skedaddle by Hadley, who tells them they've got a job to do. This leaves just the most important employees in the room. It's just like how intimate scenes are handled on a movie set. Typically, all crew members will be cleared out of the room to make the actors more comfortable, except for the essentials, camera operator and sound. This guy even has a utility belt like something you might see a gaffer wearing on a movie set. As a former sound mixer, I'm pretty familiar with this procedure. I know what you're thinking. CZ, your humor is too immature. There's no way you did those scenes. But somehow I did. I never cracked, I never laughed, and I think it actually is because there was no one in the room. Like if I made eye contact with someone, it would have been harder. Anyway, we also see them do other things that help set the scene, like engaging the pheromone mist and cranking up the lights to put the sacrifices at ease. These are both things that a cinematographer might do to set the scene perfectly in a movie. Again, Hadley and Sitterson are kind of triple dipping their film set roles. I even noticed that the golf cart that they travel around in is emblematic of their filmmaker status. The carts are adorned with a red circle icon, the universal symbol for recording. One of my favorite examples of their efforts to craft a good cliche chiller movie is this part. A typical horror movie mistake is a character letting their guard down and dropping their weapon. It seems like all of the weapons in the cabin have electrical components, and a simple flip of a switch sends a small enough shock to make Dana subconsciously let go of the blade that she's holding. Finally, there's the celebration by the office workers when they think that they've won. This symbolically represents the wrap party, a party held for cast and crew to celebrate the completion of filming a project. The employees discuss the events as if it was a movie. One guy even refers to the events on the surveillance screens as the denouement, the falling action after the climax of a narrative work. However, there are two issues. One, the ritual is not wrapped up as they think it is. And two, nobody seems to realize just how well they fit the bill for the human sacrifices. As the cabin in the woods jumps back and forth between the story of the sacrifices and the organization, I started to notice a parallel between these two groups. The office workers were going through the same horror movie formula that they were forcing the tributes to go through without even realizing it. Like the sacrifices, the organization contains 5 main characters, and they too need to fill the roles specified in the ritual. Steve Hadley starts the day off by complaining about his wife installing child-proof locks on their kitchen cabinets and him having a hard time opening them.
She screwed in these little jobbies where he can't even open the door.
Safe to say that makes him the fool. The surveillance room is highly classified, requiring them to check in their security credentials with this guy, Daniel Truman, whose name may be a reference to the 1998 movie The Truman Show, where the main character discovers his entire life is a reality TV show captured by hidden cameras. The same is true for our cabin sacrifices, but this could be our first hint that the organization is actually the cast of a show of its own. There's also the fact that the last glitch for the Americans came in '98, the same year that The Truman Show was released. Daniel is the security guard. He's essentially their muscle, placing him firmly in the athlete category. We also discover that it's his first year, and he's learning the ropes alongside the audience. The tributes also have a newcomer, Holden, who is stated to be a transfer student who recently joined the football team. There's an additional parallel between the two. They both opt to take the moral high ground. Holden warns Dana about the one-way mirror instead of peeping on her while she gets changed, and Truman refuses to take part in the office pool to profit off of the tribute's deaths. They work with a chemist named Wendy Lynn. She's portrayed as the smart and sensitive one, and she is the scholar of the group. When she comes with recommendations to medicate their subjects, Gary Sitterson has something else on his mind.
Do we pipe it in, or do you want to do it orally?
Ask me that again, only slower.
You're a pig.
Sitterson is the whore in this scenario. That just leaves the director. On the bottom floor, she's the last surviving member of the organization, making her the virgin final girl. She isn't seen until the end, but when we do see her, she's played by one of the most iconic final girls in cinema, Sigourney Weaver, aka Ellen Ripley from Alien. Together, these five make up their swastigram of ritual sacrifices, and they go through the same steps as their younger counterparts. For example, after the 5 students pass through the gas station, the Harbinger calls the office to warn them not to take this group lightly. But they don't take him seriously at all, the same mistake that most horror movie characters make after receiving a Harbinger's warning. Then, they proceed to let their guard down by getting their party started at the exact same time as the students that they're watching over.
Oh, let's get this party started! Let's get this party started!
Sitterson and Hadley even start dancing alongside the characters that they're spying on screen. The tributes are blissfully unaware of what's going on below them, and the office workers also demonstrate that they don't fully understand what's happening beneath them when Marty is dragged away by a redneck zombie and Hadley pulls the lever to drain his blood into the sacrificial carving, causing the earth to rumble.
Must be getting excited downstairs.
But they're not getting excited, they're reacting to a mistake in the ritual, that being that Marty isn't really dead. Then there's Sitterson's mad rush to get to the explosives room to cave in the tunnel before the tributes escape, which of course happens in parallel with the tributes' rush to get out of there in the RV. After the Rambler is crashed into the lake, Dana resurfaces right as the people downstairs pull bottles of champagne from the water in the cooler. It's more than just a cool match cut, it represents the growing list of similarities between the group on the surface and the group who thinks that they're pulling the strings. And that list culminates with the ending, where Dana and Marty unleash their own nightmare creatures against them. I think the parallel between the sacrifices and the slaughter of the organization members is important, because The Cabin in the Woods is a movie that satirizes the genre, but also genuinely takes part in it. It seems like it's often in the conversation when it comes to some of the top horror movies of the early 10s, but is just as often slapped with the label of comedy. I don't know if I agree with that classification, but it definitely comes with a message. Even a tested and loved formula can get boring if the creators don't offer an innovative twist. And a secret underground organization forcing college students to undergo tired horror movie tropes to satisfy apocalyptic ancient gods definitely qualifies as an interesting subversion. Which brings me back to Marty, the anti-fool whose drug use has dampened his cognition in such a way that he can see past their tricks. At the beginning, he goes on a rant about the binding confines of society.
Society needs to crumble. We're all just too chicken to let it.
Is this his metatextual way of saying that reused old horror conventions need to change? It certainly seems that way, especially when you consider what he says at the end, when he and Dana make it all the way down to the blood ritual chamber, and the director tells him that he and his friends had to be killed in order to satisfy the Ancient Ones and prevent the end of the world.
Maybe that's the way it should be. If you gotta kill all my friends to survive, maybe it's time for a change.
That change might entail a new generation of filmmakers with a fresh set of ideas.
It's time to give someone else a chance.
And that's exactly what happens. When the director is killed by one of the creatures set free by Dana, the new blood outlives the old, and the American attempt at satisfying the ritual fails, causing the Ancient Ones to rise up and destroy the Earth. So if the college-age sacrifices are the actors and the organization are the filmmakers, then who are the Ancient Ones? That would have to be you, the audience. The viewers whose continued patronage is the reason for formulaic filmmaking, but who also have the power to change it by supporting creativity.
The Ancient Ones see everything.
The era of the Cabin in the Woods style horror film may never truly be over, but it's definitely given way to a new contender, the religious horror film. I recently put out a commentary video taking an in-depth look at what has become the genre's most monotonous trend, and what can be done to change it. And if you're liking the vids, remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell for all notifications, don't forget to check out the Literally Dead merch, and I'll see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.